And what this minister wants to do is just snap back to that old high fee system. This could well act as a handbrake on the economy. If women and families are not able to access affordable childcare, how are they going to get back to work? How are they going to actually participate in the economy? How are they going to actually be able to make ends meet? What we know is that for many families, the cost of childcare prior to this pandemic was just out of reach. It was too expensive and too difficult. And of course, now with this announcement from the minister that he wants to just snap back, many families are just going to shrug their shoulders and say it's all too hard. What we need from this minister is a plan that can deliver accessible, affordable childcare that it meets the needs of families, especially during these difficult economic times. Just going back and saying to families that it doesn't matter what's happening, it doesn't matter in your workplace, we are just going to add those fees onto your cost of living pressures is just not good enough.
What's the alternative then?
Well, there's been a number of plans being put out there by think tanks, by policy institutes, but the minister hasn't considered any of these. The minister has not considered any of these. In fact, he hasn't made any real alterations to the fee system. And like I said, as we know that we had a 7% increase in fees, that's 3 times CPI in the most recent data coming out about fees.
To go on forever?
What we want is a system that works for families. What we've got is a snapback to the system that was designed for pre-pandemic. And what the government doesn't seem to understand is that parents are facing financial hardship. And what the government said is bad luck. Bad luck. You are going to face the same fees that you did prior to this, one of the most expensive in the world. So the government had a number of options on the table and they chose none of them. They chose not to change the CCS percentage, not to look at which groups might really need free childcare. Like I said, there was a range of proposals on the table and they chose none of them. Well, I'm not in government. I'm not the minister. What I'm saying is there is a number on the table and the government chose none of them. They chose just to snap back.
The minister's saying that the minister's saying the sector wants this in part because we're seeing up to 3/4 of kids back in care now. So do you anticipate that we actually might see that attendance numbers drop once the fees go back?
Well, look, we don't know because the government has basically done no real modelling on this and no real investigation. And what we had was a sector under significant pressure because the government announced free childcare, but they didn't fund it. And so we had a sector begging the government for financial relief just to keep their doors open. And so it's not surprising that they would take any money from this government because they were under significant financial pressure. But the government hasn't done any modelling or any significant research in what demand might be once this free childcare goes away. What I'm most worried about is the impact that it's going to have on families who are worried about their cost of living pressures, worried about getting back to work, and really having childcare costs as a barrier to getting back to work is a terrible outcome.
What's a manageable CCS percentage then, in your view?
Well, look, there are a number of options on the table. It is a complex system. It is a complex system with a lot of percentages. He did say it was a complex system. That's why I don't know why he's snapping back to it. He's snapping back to it. There is a range of different financial pressures on families. They are underemployed. They are facing unemployment. And quite frankly, it might be a variety of percentages that he needed to look at, but he didn't look at those. And what we've got is families facing the same significant fee hikes and pressures that they did previous to this pandemic.
Prevented the free childcare program then?
Look, once again, I'm not in government, but the minister announced free childcare, they didn't fund it. And what we're saying to the minister is design a system that actually meets the needs of families, affordable and accessible. And this minister has not done that. They've snapped back. to the old system. They've snapped back immediately with no changes and no relief for families.
$6 million in that miscalculation of JobKeeper, should that be put towards childcare to either reform the system to give more supports during this time? What's your view on that?
Well, look, what I'm saying is that families want to get back to work, and if a job's available, then the cost of childcare shouldn't be a barrier. The cost of childcare shouldn't be a barrier, and unfortunately, by snapping back to the old system, it will. It will be a barrier for many families not being able to get back to work because of the cost of childcare.
Minister's admission that the transition payment will be slightly less than the sector would be getting in JobKeeper.
Well, look, the Minister has not been able to really explain why he is moving from JobKeeper to this transitional payment. Of course, the government promised to keep JobKeeper going, and a few days later they've broken that promise. So obviously we will be looking at very carefully the impact that this will have on early educators. We don't want to see early educators lose their job. They have provided an essential service through this pandemic. They've turned up to work day after day, looking after children, allowing those essential workers to continue doing their job. So we'll have to consult with the sector widely, but it is concerning that the government has broken its promise only a few days after they promised to keep JobKeeper going.
Isn't it the case that there were concerns about eligibility in the sector and what casuals are covered? So it may actually be better for the sector that they're doing it this way?
As I said, I will be consulting carefully with the sector to see the impact on the centres and indeed, importantly, the educators. They're the ones that have been turning up and doing their job. We do know that it was poorly targeted and that 33% of educators approximately were missing out, but we don't know the impact of what taking that payment away and replacing it with another payment will do, and I'll be consulting with the sector. But like I said, the government did make a promise that they would keep JobKeeper. They have broken that promise, but equally I want to work with the sector to make sure, importantly, educators still have jobs, they're still able to care for our children.
2 weeks ago show that parents, if free childcare would be turned off, parents would have to reduce or actually pull their kids out of childcare. What's your response to that now that this has happened today, and what will be the impact on the sector given that sentiment?
Well, look, I have great concerns that parents will be sitting around their kitchen tables doing the maths and working out that childcare will just be too expensive for them. As I said, we've snapped back to the old system that was one of the most expensive in the world, an increase of 7% over a year in the most recent figures. So I think a lot of parents will be having to make difficult decisions. Do they take on an extra shift, or do they and pay for childcare, or do they not? I am very worried that by just going back to the old system, by not designing anything new, putting any new measures in place, that families will just find childcare unaffordable.
Do you think their pause on the activity test or extension of the activity test for people who lost work and during the crisis is going to actually help those families so they can get more subsidised care for the amount of activity they're doing, but will it actually help them?
Look, I think it's obviously an important step in terms of ensuring that those people on JobKeeper and JobSeeker are able to actually get subsidised care, but I am still worried about the cost. I'm still worried about the cost of childcare despite the suspension of the activity test, and so I am worried that it's not going to do its job and actually make early childhood education and care more accessible for those families.
Free, or should the CCS percentage change? What's your position on that?
Look, they are two options that have been analysed on the table. Or I'm not going to come and try and make decisions based on from opposition, make government policy from opposition. But what I would have urged the government is to consider some of the alternative options on the table, the alternative directions. The minister himself said this was overly complex and the system wasn't necessarily fit for purpose. This was what the minister himself said. So to have changed that position now, I think shows that he is not in touch with Australian families.